Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is Saturday morning, 10 o'clock in the morning here in Calgary, Alberta, Saturday the 27th of November. This is Worldwide Epidemic of Child Abuse and Human Rights Abuses. It's a half-an-hour program. I just wanted to look at some of the stuff that's going on out there around the world and, the whole issues of, it's not child abuse and human rights abuses are not just taking place like in one country. This is a worldwide issue, and I focus mainly on the national issues, whether it's Canada, United States, North American issues of child abuse and especially the issues of domestic violence and abuse and whatnot. But I wanted to take a look at the whole worldwide issue too, so that's why I'm doing a Saturday show. So we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and the chat room is open if you'd like to sit in there. And yeah, I'm glad to be able to do this, and I look at this stuff as on a worldwide scale, not just looking at what's going on in North America. I do focus on North America because I think that we got to help our own countries first. I really do believe that. I work with a lot of groups who work in other countries to help promote education, and especially with women and children. And so I'm very much involved internationally, but my main focus is the national issue of child abuse mainly. Because it's such a huge issue and children are dying right here in our own countries, United States and Canada. It's absolutely pathetic and ridiculous what is going on. I'll just keep saying it. I really don't care if I repeat myself. If we need to keep repeating ourselves, obviously people just aren't listening. You know what I mean? They're still killing their children. They're still abusing their children and in every way. It's absolutely pathetic and horrible. And if we don't stand up and speak out against it, boy, there's something wrong with us. And I'm glad I finally got off the couch. I knew, 3.5 years ago, I said, man, why am I not saying something? I know what's going on out here in the world. I don't like what I see. I don't like these headlines that roll out that I see and the stuff on the news, and especially regarding children who have no rights unless we stand up for them. And so I thought, why not get involved? I finally got off the couch 3.5 years ago and decided to get involved, and I'm happy that I finally did, because it was just driving me crazy just seeing all this stuff happening and thinking, since I grew up abused and grew up with a lot of domestic violence and abuse, and a lot of my friends were abused and people I've known in my lifetime, and I thought, why am I not saying anything? This is so absolutely wrong. And it's wrong around the world, not just in North America. It's just wrong for people to be treating each other this way, and I don't mind saying it. And, I figure, hey, what do I have better to do with my time than to speak out against abuses of all kinds. So I figure I have nothing better to do with my time, so why not? So that's why I'm doing this show. So you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. I talk about the issues of abuse, and I don't sugarcoat it and don't minimize it. And so it's a very sensitive topic, abuse. A lot of people are very uncomfortable listening to it. Like, I was very uncomfortable being abused. So, talking about it's not a problem for me. But, because I spent my whole life in this mess, right? So it's something I'm okay talking about, but I know that certain people, you may find it a bit sensitive. And so if you feel like the topic of abuse may bother you, or domestic violence and abuse, child abuse and all this, you might want to turn the show off, right? You have to listen at your own discretion. And young people under the age of 18, anytime there's a chat room present, you should have permission to be involved. Like, my shows are very much about stopping child abuse, but there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I just believe in protecting children at all times. And so I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're fighting to save children's lives. So if you're under the age of 18 and you're listening to my show, please have an adult, someone that you know and trust, okay it, that you can listen to this show. And anytime you're in a chat room, a situation where you're in a chat room or there's a chat room there, you make sure that an adult knows what you're doing and that you have the information on how to keep yourself safe, right? It's just so important. So we'll get right on into this show here. This is I found this information came into my inbox, and I just wanted to take a look at it. It's from IRIN, the IRIN, that's Humanitarian News and Analysis. It's a service of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. And this popped into my inbox on Wednesday, the 24th of November. And it says, Laos, lawmakers meet to address domestic violence. So it says, Vientiane, 24 November 2010, IRIN, in a first for the region, parliamentarians in Laos are addressing domestic violence by hosting a conference for regional lawmakers on the 25th of November in the capital, Vientiane, in Laos, for the first time for this region. This is the first time that they're addressing domestic violence in a conference in 2010. Can you imagine? I mean, this is good news. I'm glad that they're doing it. And it's unfortunate that it's taken them till 2010 to do something like this, but it's great to see this happening, right? So the Laotian government and most sectors of society have been slow to acknowledge domestic violence, said Doongi Audachak, who heads the National Assembly's Socio-Cultural Affairs Committee and the Lao Association of Parliamentarians on Population and Development. People consider violence in the home an internal affair, not to be discussed. It is important to protect a family's reputation. Violence is an unsuitable tradition that has been practiced for many years. It is hard to change tradition, quote unquote. That's what they said. 80% of women in a national 2006 survey said a husband was justified in hitting them if they went out without telling him, neglected the children, argued with him, refused sex, or burnt a meal. This is a survey that they did with women in Laos, and the 80% of the women in this survey that was done in 2006, a national survey, said that a husband was justified in hitting them if they went out without telling him, neglected the children, argued with him, refused sex, or burnt a meal. So these women, 80% of the women think that it's okay for their husbands to hit them or, to abuse them, right? On paper, it says the government has ratified major conventions to protect women and children, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. But a 1992 criminal law makes no mention of domestic violence. Marital rape is not a crime, and less harmful acts between close relatives carry little or no penalties. And in 2004, a law on the development and protection of women mentions domestic violence but relies on the 1992 Penal Code for punishment, which does not protect women before a case goes to trial, such as by issuing a restraining order against the alleged offender, right? So there's just not been a whole lot done to protect women and to protect children, right? In practice, these laws have not translated into better protection, said Alzacek. Domestic violence already is a crime in our country, but women are too shy to report for fear of shame, and there is much education to be done because violence is accepted as a casual occurrence in the home, quote, that's him, quote unquote. So it is. He's saying, that it's a crime in the country, but the women are too shy to report it for fear or shame, or shame, right? And this is just the whole issue with domestic violence. This is very sort of the scenario around the world, whether it's Switzerland, the United States, Mexico. It doesn't matter what country. Domestic violence and abuse, human beings are the same. They feel the same ways about this stuff. We all know what it's like to be hurt. We all know what it's like to live in fear. We can all experience these things. In other words, right? Like as human beings on the planet, if you've experienced trauma, then we have this bond, right? Because everybody knows if you've experienced this stuff, what it's like and what it does to you. Some people, thank God, who haven't experienced it, which I would hope that there was more that hadn't experienced it and wouldn't have a clue what it's like, but sadly enough, that's not the case. There's people out there that wouldn't know what it's like, but that's great. You don't want everybody to know what it's like because that means that then everybody would have been abused, and you just don't want that, right? But the whole issue is that we all feel, the same way when these types of things happen to us. So these women in Laos are no different than anybody in the United States. Fear and shame and the whole idea that the family is going to think differently about them, or maybe they weren't a good wife, maybe they were not a good, they weren't doing the right things for their husband, and they were just, that's why their husband had to treat them like this. And so many times women think like that. They think it's their fault, and mainly a lot of times because women are told by their abuser, whoever the abuser is, that, it's their fault, and that if they would change the way that they were behaving, then the abuser wouldn't have to do what they do to them, which would be to whatever way they're abusing them, whether it's physically or, verbally, emotionally, psychologically, or sexually, right? A lot of times, and most of the time, the abuser blames the victim and makes the victim feel that it's their fault. And this is just a fact. This is the truth. And it's very, very sad. That's why we need education out there. Education is very, very important for people because these women out here they may have, obviously these people who have very heavy-duty traditions, for instance, like in Laos, these women would have been brought up to think that it's okay that a man can hit their women if they burn a meal, this type of stuff, right? Unless their parents told them different and their grandparents told them different, that's the tradition, see? So they grow up thinking that it's that's the way it is, and they accept it, see? And then, there's a whole other side of the situation where, in North America, we have laws and we say, no, that's wrong, that nobody should be abusing anyone. And that, no one deserves to be abused, that we all have these human rights. And even though we have a hard time protecting them in our own countries even, right, United States and Canada, that's why I'm saying it's absolutely ridiculous that over here we have these problems. We have men and women thinking it's perfectly okay to abuse people and to abuse children. It's absolutely pathetic. I think we should round them all up and send them off to some sort of an island and let them duke it out and kill each other, and the rest of us can all just go on and have a nice life, and learn how to work through things without abusing each other and not hurt people and hurt children, right? I don't see why we have to put up with these abusers, right? I can't, it just makes me angry because it's like we spend an awful lot of resources and there's money, billions of dollars, $105 billion to be exact, because of child abuse. That doesn't even include domestic violence. You can imagine it's probably more like $600-700 billion just because of abuse in our country, in the United States. And then you figure Canada in there, let's just say, I don't know, $1 trillion, maybe $1 trillion a year. Why is this happening? It just shows you how sick our society really is. That there's people out here that think we're so civilized, and they drive their cars and they paint their nails and they go to work. Well, there's only a small percentage of people that are not living in some abusive lifestyle, because that's just a fact. I mean, 50 to 80% of women around the world have been abused by their partner, by their intimate partner, and children around the world are being abused all the time. And just in the United States alone, it's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys will experience some form of abuse under the age of 18, whether it's sexual, physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, or neglect. 1 in 3 to 4 girls, 1 in 6 to 7 boys. Well, that's too many. And so we think we have problems over here. You can imagine over these other countries where it's perfectly okay, and it's just thought that it's just the way that it is, that a man can abuse a woman for burning a meal or going out without telling their husband. So, and they think that's okay, right? So they have a lot of work to do, because at least in our country we have people shouting out against it and saying, no, it's not okay. But in those countries, nobody wants to stand up and say it out of fear and of retribution and fear from the law, and they don't have the same rights that we do. They don't have the same rights that we do. No country in the world, I don't think, has the same rights that we enjoy here in North America, which is the United States and Canada. It doesn't include Mexico. But the United States and Canada, we have rights. And if we don't stand up and protect those rights, they will be taken away. We'll lose them one by one. And so it's very important for people to realize that we have to stand up to protect our rights. We have to stand up to protect children's rights, and we have to stand up to protect everyone's rights, because we have these rights and they've been put in place. And if we don't secure them and make sure they stay there, they'll disappear. You watch. So it says that village mediation units focus mostly on reconciliation rather than prosecution, and staff are often untrained, according to the UN Population Fund. So, even if there's domestic violence going on, domestic abuse, there's not much help for these people, right, in Laos, right, for these women. It's just horrible. It says Althachak attributes often unreported domestic violence to women's lower level of education and economic dependence on partners, as well as drugs and alcohol. It says the men get drunk and go home to beat their wives, who remain silent, says the lawmaker. And that's quote unquote. And of 967 women surveyed in 2004 by a local umbrella civil society or association, Gender Development Group, 31% of those who reported domestic abuse listed drunkenness as the cause. Well, it's just not the cause, but it does make it worse. It's not the cause; it's just another issue. When there's abuse in the home and there's also substance abuse and alcoholism, it's two different things. It's just that together it's deadly. It's not good at all. They say the next steps. The National Assembly is expecting some 100 participants for the UN-sponsored conference, mostly parliamentarians from neighboring Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Myanmar. On the schedule are sessions concerning the economic cost of violence, the situation and responses in the region, and the role of parliamentarians in fighting gender-based violence. Althachak said the National Assembly would start discussions after the conference to broaden legal protection against gender-based violence, particularly domestic violence, conduct outreach to parliamentarians who are then responsible for carrying the anti-violence message to their constituents, and create survivor associations countrywide. So they are working on it, and that's great to see. But it's just crazy that this is the first time that they're actually looking at domestic violence and abuse in Laos, right? It's just crazy. This is 2010. But it's good to see that they're doing it. And now it'll kind of, like they're saying, they're going to bring in Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, and all the surrounding countries to be a part of those meetings so that they can get that whole region to start thinking about the issues of domestic violence and abuse and to start helping these people, these women out. Thank God. But, it shouldn't have taken them until 2010 to decide to do it. But, it's better than nothing, and it is good to see something, something positive going on, right? It's good, right? So the next article I want to look at, this is also, it's just crazy. There's just so many. I mean, I just pick a few here, right? I mean, I just have all this stuff popping into my inbox because I study the whole issues of international community development, the worldwide issues of child abuse, domestic violence, and whatnot. So all this stuff just pops into my inbox, and I just check through it, and it's just crazy what's going on out there. This is Sri Lanka. This article is also from IRIN, and that's the IRIN, IRIN, Humanitarian News and Analysis, a service of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. This was posted November the 10th, 2010. It says, Sri Lanka, former child soldiers struggle for a normal life. Badakaloa, Cherian was 15 when he was abducted into the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the LTTE. He ran away 2 years later in January 2009. Quote unquote, being with the LTTE was a disaster. I never believed or cared for their cause and don't like violence in general, but I feel that I might be seen as a terrorist or a violent person by others. This thought is very depressing. So this is what he says, this Charan, this boy, 15 years old. Well, he was 15 when he was abducted. He was abducted into the Liberation Tigers of Tamil, see. So, and then he ran away in 2009 and got away from them. So since the Sri Lankan government declared victory against the LTTE over a year ago, former child soldiers like Charan have returned home, but many still face problems reintegrating and are fighting another battle to overcome psychological scars and regain acceptance into society. It says, according to the UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, 6,903 children are known to have been recruited by the LTTE between 2002 and 2007. That's almost 7,000 children were recruited, have been known to have been recruited into the Liberation Tigers of Tamil from 2002 to 2007. Now that's horrible. These children, these are children that should not be dragged into a war or a conflict. These are children that should be allowed to remain children. And this kind of stuff is going on in Africa. It's going on all around the world. Child soldiers, children being made to, being forced to carry a gun and to do horrible things and to be involved in every horrible nightmarish situation, in these skirmishes and in these civil wars that are going on in these countries. These poor kids don't even have a chance, They already have a hard enough time because of the poverty and because of the lack of education that's in their countries, the fact that their economies are so bad that it's hard for a child in those countries to actually be a child. But the thing is they shouldn't be dragged into fighting alongside militiamen. These are children, right? And it makes me sick that this is actually happening. It says, since the 1980s, the Tamil Tigers used children, many of them forcibly conscripted as scouts and sentries. And in the 1990s, also for combat, said Brigadier Sudantha Ranasinghe, Director General of the Government Department, mandated to rehabilitate former child soldiers. When the conflict ended in May 2009, the government helped reintegrate the children into society by giving them counseling and vocational training and helping them to enroll in school. In April, the government closed its last remaining rehabilitation center for former child soldiers in the northern town of Vavunia. According to UNICEF, 588 children have been returned with their families, while 9 children remain in children's homes, and a further 54 children have been returned to school hostels for their education. And the government and UN Children's Agency are working on establishing community-based reintegration to meet the needs of all the children. Children are always victims of war and are never perpetrators. Society now has a duty of fully reintegrating these children without any discrimination, said Hebamal Jayawardena, a legal protection specialist who has worked with former child soldiers. If we fail to trust them, if we treat them differently or act in an irresponsible manner, we could create a situation where their pasts could begin to haunt their minds again. Then all the good work of the rehabilitation process could be in vain, he said. And resilience. It says children have remarkable coping mechanisms and can even block out the shattering psychological trauma they've suffered. Jaya Wardena said, the seemingly normal life ex-combatant children are now going through shows their resilience and the great ability of children to cope and adapt, he said. With time, most have been able to forget and put into their past the terrifying experiences they went through during recruitment, training, carrying lethal weapons, and even engaging in war. It says, nonetheless, the trauma of life at war when no one is paying attention to a child's needs has serious repercussions on a child's psychological growth. Child soldiers live in environments that are the complete opposite from a normal child living environment, said Mehasen Ganeshan, a psychiatrist who works with trauma-affected children in eastern Sri Lanka. Being a child soldier distorts a child's view. Their expectations about everything change. And many former child soldiers lack confidence and therefore struggle with relationships and trust. They also have problems with anger management, he said. Such issues pose a challenge for their reintegration with their families, schools, and communities. It's hard for them to make friends and spend spare time together because of their former association with armed groups, said Win Mama Aya, the head of Children Protection for Save the Children in Sri Lanka. When there is a security-related incident, people often suspect the involvement of former child soldiers, which deters them from starting afresh, she said, adding that they also have a hard time finding jobs. All of these lead to more stress and often result in more aggressive or depressive behavior, Win Mama Aya said. I wish I had died. Susila, the youngest child of a family of 4, was 15 when she was forcibly recruited by the LTTE in 2001. She was beaten and eventually forced into battle. She ran away from the LTTE 6 years later. Now 24, Susila is unemployed, surviving with help from her family in Kokadichaloya village, Batkola district. She tries hard not to think about the war. I thought I would die, especially after 2006 when fighting became really bad, she said. Sometimes I wished I had simply died in the fighting. The worst was the fear of pending death rather than death itself. So that's horrible. And these are girls and boys. These are not adults. These are children that were, forced and kidnapped and abducted and made to go into, to fight alongside these liberation tigers of Tamil. But these guys are not the only ones that have done this. You look at the articles and what's going on in Africa. I mean, Africa, there's so many child soldiers. I mean, who knows how many child soldiers there are really in Africa. It's absolutely horrific, It's absolutely horrific. These children should never have to be part of this. And, not even there. You think about what's going on in South America. I study this whole thing. So, all Guatemala, El Salvador, San Salvador, Honduras, you name it. Any South or Central American country is, they've all been, especially Central America there, they've had a lot of problems, and they have used child soldiers, and girls and boys, right? And they kidnap them into those things too, and they force them to. A lot of times they just end up sex slaves, end up just. It's absolutely horrific. It's like it should never be happening. No child should be abducted, period. And sadly enough, we have people abducting our own children here in Canada and the United States and putting them into child sex trafficking. And, this is ridiculous. Where are children's rights? If we don't stand up for these children, then the rights are not upheld. Their rights just don't exist unless, it's on paper. It looks really good on paper, doesn't it? But when people are violating these rights, we have to all get involved, and we all have to, stand up and say, hey, this is wrong, and do what you can wherever you can, with your own voice and with your own abilities, right? Because not everybody's got a whole lot of time or money to donate to these kinds of things. Whole issue is becoming aware and speak out against it when you can, and stand up and get involved locally with groups who are helping children in your own areas. I think that's awesome. Groups who are helping to stop child abuse in your own communities, get involved with, maybe volunteering at some of the different places like domestic violence shelters, things like this we can always do. We can get involved when the campaigns come out, the national campaigns, to stop and prevent child abuse come out. We can get involved there. There's a lot of different ways we can get involved to raise our voices, right? But mainly I would say, everybody just needs to, learn the signs and symptoms of abuse first of all, for North America, right? We all need to do this. We need to learn all the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse and learn how to report abuse properly, right? Because if you don't report child abuse properly to the authorities, the case can be, the information could be thrown out of court because it was not taken properly, and then the child could end up back in the home. And sometimes these children are killed because they're put back into the home with the abuser, and then we see months later that they're killed, murdered at the hands of their parents or caregivers. So make sure that you know the signs and symptoms of abuse, and that you are looking out for children in your own life, in your own homes, in your own world, to make sure that they're not being abused. Because if we were all doing this, we could stop a lot of abuse, And then promote education. Do whatever you can to promote education in our schools. First of all, to reach our youth. We need to reach this next generation. These high school kids, these junior high kids, and these elementary kids that are coming up, for the next generation. They are the future of this country. They are the future of North America. And we need to reach them, and we need to make sure that they know that abuse is against the law, first of all, that it is not right, and that that having a healthy, good and happy life is the way to go. Because what they're seeing on TV and what they're seeing out in this world is all about violence and abuse. And they think that that's the way life should be. So we need to get in there, and we need to start working with our youth, to promote positive, relationships, positive, healthy lifestyles, positive thinking, positive child, and parenting. We need to reach the young people. They are going to have to ultimately change this, right? I mean, the rest of us are doing what we can to be a voice and to do what we can within our own abilities and with our own capabilities to stop child abuse and protect children's rights and stand up and speak out against abuses of all types. But we really need to reach the young people. So promote education where you are, in your town, in your cities. Promote education. We have to reach the young people. They're ultimately they are the next generation, and they will be popping out lots and lots of kids. And if they don't know that abuse is wrong because they've grown up in it and that's all they know and that's all they've seen, they will continue the cycle of abuse on. So every single child out here right now who's being abused, who doesn't get killed at the hands of their parents and caregiver, has the potential to pass the cycle on. And so many other children who witness abuse in their homes, whether it's family violence, domestic violence, maybe they aren't even being abused, but just being in that environment can cause them to pass the cycle of abuse on. And so it's very, very important to reach these young people. So promote education within your own cities, your own towns, your own school districts. Promote education within the schools to reach these kids, to let them know that abuse is wrong and that they should not be abused and they should not be abusers, right? And that, we can all have a good life. There's no reason why we have to live this life that TV portrays for us, and other media portrays for us, all about violence and abuse, right? That's not what it has to be about. But these kids don't know that because their whole life is just saturated with violence and horrible stuff. So then we have parents out here, like this most recent case of this woman, this young lady who, I don't want to call her a young lady, but this mother who killed her baby because she was playing Farmville and the baby was interrupting her time on Farmville. This is what we have. People, this is a disaster. This is an epidemic. This is a crisis. You know what I mean? This is urgent. It's like red flags. There should be sirens going off right now all around the country saying, we've got to make this stop now. Let's get the education out there. Let's get the work done out here with these children today and change this world for them. We need to start doing it ourselves, first of all, because we really have to get the ball rolling. And so we need to do it now and get these kids involved, too, so that they can be a part of changing their world, because they're going to have a lot of work to do. And if we don't start the ball, we don't get the ball rolling for them, they're just going to continue this mess on, and more children are going to suffer needlessly. Child abuse and human rights abuses are 100% preventable. If people would stop abusing children, there you go. Abuse is a choice, right? Everybody keep that in mind. And abusing your partners, domestic violence and abuse, is a choice, right? Keep that in mind. It's 100% preventable. This is not some sort of disease, like genetic disease, like cancer or whatever, that just comes on and there's nothing you can do about it. And this is a choice. People are choosing to kill, murder, and abuse their children and sexually use them. People are choosing to abuse and kill their partners. This has to stop. And so if we don't speak out against it, man, we are just as guilty as far as I'm concerned. So speak out against abuse, stand up, get courageous, and start using your voice, right? It's very, very important. I have a good friend here in the chat room. Thanks for being here. And she's an advocate, and she does a lot of great work. she's working to change the laws up here in Canada, thank God. So, everybody take care of yourselves. Have a great day. If you need any of the information that I was talking about here today or any information on my shows, get a hold of me. Otherwise, I'll be back on tomorrow. And have a great day. And next week, I'll be back on One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We'll still continue on looking at angerresources.com. If you need anything, get a hold of me. I'll be around. You can contact me on Facebook or here on Blog Talk Radio, whatnot. And make sure that you just do something, do whatever you can to stop child abuse and to stop human rights abuses, right? We have to ultimately be the ones to do it. So make sure that you do your part. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.